That's as bright as you'd think. Okay, next slide. So the world is changing, right? We've all heard about climate change. But in addition to that, there's an increasing burden of environmental contaminants. So in the United States alone, we use about 80,000 chemicals. And these chemicals have to end up somewhere. And so unfortunately, the fate of many of them is to end up in aquatic environments. And since aquatic animals are bathed in that aquatic medium, they tend to be particularly vulnerable. So since I came to Maine, I try to position my research to focus on animals that are particularly important to the state's economy. So I ask lobsters how they feel about ocean acidification and climate change. I ask salmon how they feel about getting lice and, and some other things that are happening to them. But next slide. But for the next few minutes, I want to talk about the ability of certain contaminants in our environment to affect our endocrine system. And so the contaminants that affect that system are called endocrine disrupting contaminants, or EDCs. And so hormones are vital to our health. They're really important. In fact, they direct almost every physiological process that we have. And so as part of this system, so it works, it's sort of these hormones, think of it as like sort of this chemical superhighway, right? So you're sending messages and receiving signals and all of this like 24/7. So you're all actually very busy right now. And so how this system works is you have tissues that are sending out these signals and you have tissues that are receiving them. But in order to receive that signal, the recipient tissue has to have a receptor for that particular hormone. If it doesn't have that receptor, then it can't necessarily see it. If it does have that receptor, right, it's sort of like a lock and key. So if it's just the right shape, it'll sort of connect with that, and then the cell can say, or the tissue can say, okay, hormone, I see you, now I'm going to do what you told me to do, right? So next slide. And so on the left you have testosterone, and on the right you have estradiol. And so basically estrogen. I'm just using these as examples. And so testosterone and estradiol look very, very similar, right? In fact, it's just that circle bit that I circled there is the only way they're different, that little dangly bit. But estradiol can't fit into the testosterone receptor and vice versa. Even though they look really similar, they're not quite the same. But there are chemicals in our environment that look so similar to our natural hormones that they're actually able to fit into the receptors for various hormones, right? Depends on what the chemical is, and be able to fit in these and actually effectuate a response from the cell. So that's not good. And it's not good for adults, but it's especially problematic for developing embryos whose developmental trajectory can be completely derailed by receiving the wrong hormone signal at the wrong time, right? So that's a really important aspect. So next slide. And so what are some of the things that we see in fish or aquatic animals that are exposed to these endocrine disrupting contaminants? And so some of the things that we see, so it can change their sex, it can affect all kinds of, many aspects of reproduction, it can cause a number of other numerous health effects that are actually diseases and a number of other things, and it can also affect something called vitellogenesis. So this is kind of an interesting story. So female fish under normal conditions, maybe the environment is right or the season is right, and all of a sudden she starts producing extra estrogen. Then her liver picks up that signal and says, oh, estrogen, I hear what you're saying to me, I'm going to produce this thing called vitellogenin. So it makes vitellogenin, sends it out into the bloodstream, and then her developing eggs suck it up like a sponge, because what they use vitellogenin for is to make egg yolk, right? And egg yolk is what the developing embryo will feed on and it needs until it can eat on its own. So it's really important. So do male fish need to produce vitellogenin? Right? No, there's no reason for them to produce vitellogenin. But what happens if you put male fish into, or they're just swimming naturally in water that contains high levels of an endocrine disrupting contaminant, especially estrogenic ones, right? Well, they start producing vitellogenin, right? It's energetically costly. It's not necessarily good for them, right? But this is what happens. And so for one of the things that regulators do is they look downstream for power from plants and things like that are discharging into water bodies, and they look for male fish that are producing vitellogenin. So hormones and all the processes they regulate can really tell you a lot about the quality of the water that the fish are swimming in. Okay, next slide. And so I've dealt with a lot of different animals, and so you can see some of up here, sturgeon, I know it's not a fish, but all life stages of alligators. And so we found that it can do a number of things. It can change hormone concentrations. It can reduce their phallus size. Yes, that's what you think it is. It can change a number of things we have shark species that we've looked at, salmon, zebrafish, right? And so it can actually change the metabolism of zebrafish depending on what contaminant it is. Next slide. Perfect timing. And so if you don't care about fish, right, you should care about fish. Fish are amazing. But if you don't care about fish, this is interesting and serendipitous that just a few days ago, the New York Times came out with an article that talks about what these contaminants can do in people, right? And it's not good, right? It's not just sperm. I mean, sperm get hurt, but it's not just sperm.
That was awesome. The race against the clock. That was great. Does anybody have any questions for Sarah? Here you go. So where are the contaminants primarily coming from?
Everywhere. They're personal care products. They're coming from industrial effluent. It's many. I mean, it's 80,000 chemicals. So really think about all the chemicals you use in a particular day, right? So they're coming from packaging. You know, the foods that you eat. So it's really coming from many different sources.
How many sex-reversed fish are you seeing in Maine rivers?
So I don't look at them from an ecological perspective. I do more of the lab work, but I do know that people that are working a lot, right? And so not only do you see sex reversal, but sometimes you'll see a lot of like fish that are hermaphroditic that shouldn't be. So they have both eggs and sperm, production, and that's not good. No, it's not good.
So what can it do to humans besides affect the sperm?
Yeah, so that's a really it's a great question, but it's somewhat difficult because I can interrogate animals, right? Because I can ask them all these things in a lab setting. We can't really do that to people; it's against the law. And so we really have to look at association, and association is not necessarily causation. But I can say that there's a strong correlation with exposure to these various chemicals and all kinds. In fact, you should read that article because it's a really good article about all of the things, and it's really good language about all the things that we think it could be doing. So just as an example, sperm count in men is about 50% less than it was 50 years ago. That's scary. That's not evolution. That's probably something in the environment. And so this is what happens in lab animals, so it's not surprising that we're potentially seeing that in humans.
With what you said about the different chemicals in the environment, what can we do personally to prevent the causation of chemical acidification in the waters?
What can we do? Well, yeah, so, I mean, it ends up everywhere, right? You're exposed to them all the time. So, I mean, personally, I try and take care with what I eat, like don't microwave plastics, and things like that. And I try and be careful of things that are maybe overly smelly, like, like lotions and things like that, because those contain things called phthalates, which help with the smell, but they might not be good in other areas. So there are many things you really can do. Slow Death by Rubber Duck is a really good book. It's a really good book talking about all the ways that you can actually manipulate the things that you put in your body and how you can. It was two guys that basically just went through and did all kinds of things to really make their levels really, really high and really, really low to show that you really can do things. Yeah.
One of the things I was wondering about is the chemicals that we make come from the stuff we have on the planet already. Is there a way to break down, change them back into something that is not harmful?
It depends on the chemical, right? And so potentially, one of the things, wastewater treatment plants, different processes can break them down all the way or not. So I don't really know how you encourage power plants to make sure they water treatment plants to break all of those chemicals down and encourage that more expensive process, but I think it's probably worth it.
Are the contaminants equally dispersed around the world or not?
It depends on the contaminant. So some places have really high levels of certain contaminants and others don't. So I can't say that there's one region that might be particularly high because it depends on the contaminant.
What about disposal and use of prescription drugs in the environment?
Yeah, they're everywhere. They're everywhere. Yeah, I mean, you can go out into many bodies of water and find detectable levels of Prozac. I mean, yeah, so it's everywhere, and that does potentially cause a number of problems. But pharmaceuticals are a huge sort of a chemical sink. Water is a huge chemical sink for those, unfortunately.
So this probably means that like the environmental protection laws that are being so hotly debated right now we should probably be quite concerned about that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, we should keep the EPA. We should keep these because it's important. Yeah.
I don't think we can top that as a ballot question, so we should.